Slaying Sunna, Abu Ishaq al-Shāṭibī's concept of Bid'ah in al-Iʻtiṣām, McGill University, 1999, A.S. Jahar, Montreal, Canada. Chapter 3. Just as reason is a subjective factor in pronouncing on Shari'i matters, Shatibi also doubts the validity of the heart, qalb, when used as a measure to justify good or bad in the sight of the Shari'iyah. Arguing against the prophetic report, ask your heart, istafti qalbak, ask your heart. Apologies, no Arabic given. He declared he could not see a third facet to the Shari'iyah other than the Quran and the Sunnah. Any third means of justifying good or bad, he insists, probably refers to those issues which are beyond religious concerns. Shatibi's rejection of the heart's judgment when the text is silent, is based on four considerations. First, where a case arises where there is no certain text, the judgment should be based on the relevant indicant, as derived from the Shari'iyah. The fatwa of the heart, however, cannot be used as a dalil. Second, all the cases disputed by Muslims should be referred to the Quran and Sunnah, not the fatwa of the heart. Third, it is agreed among Muslims that cases which are not solved should be referred to the people of knowledge, Ahl al-Dhikr. Finally, Shatibi draws the conclusion that every man should take his lesson from God's signs in conformity with his indicants in the Quran. Shatibi's consistency in championing the supremacy of the Shari'iyah is not only reflected in his concept of Bida, but also conveyed in his effort to preserve the authenticity of the Shari'iyah from any deviations. It is true that he acknowledged the validity of istihsan in spite of it being severely opposed by al-Shafi'i, who dies in 204-820. The difference, however, between these two scholars lies in the fact that Shatibi accepted istihsan insofar as it was in line with the indicants and rejected those who treated religious matters on the basis of pure istihsan. Shafi'i, on the other hand, rejected istihsan altogether, arguing that the use of istihsan, juristic preference, in the Shari'iyah is similar to taking pleasure. In addition, Shafi'i uses istihsan as equivalent to ra'i, opinion, and hence he cannot tolerate it. Legal judgment in the Shari'iyah, according to him, can only be based on the Quran, Sunnah, and Ijma', which is consensus, and Qiyas, ratio legis. To admit opinion not based on these sources means accepting the reasoning of non-specialists. It is reasonable to assume that Shafi'i was playing it safe when he rejected istihsan by equating it with ra'i, opinion. This position, which he espoused in the latter half of his career, was probably inspired by a wish to condemn those in the quote-unquote ancient schools. And here a footnote is relevant. Footnote 67. This statement used by Shat is to indicate Shafi'i's critique against his predecessor's position in using reason. See Shat, The Origins of Muhammadan Jurisprudence. Shat notes that Shafi'i in his early period uses ra'i in the same loose way as the ancient schools. However, Shafi'i does not elaborate in detail which ancient schools he's referring to, but it's probably talking about the Hanafis and the Mu'tazili schools. So I'll repeat the sentence. This position, which he espoused in the latter half of his career, was probably inspired by a wish to condemn those in the ancient schools, and those among his contemporaries who were too free in their use of reason. In other words, Shafi'i's polemics are obviously against istihsan, an arbitrary ijtihad in favour of a disciplined qiyas as a corrective for those who juxtaposed reason and the Shari'iyah. Yet Shafi'i was ultimately forced to recognise that one has to make decisions on points of detail for which there is no evidence from the Nas. In short, ra'i, which is significant as an expression of rationalist and utilitarian tendencies, was wholly opposed by Shafi'i. This was what fueled his vehement opposition to istihsan. Nevertheless, while he unequivocally insisted on the overriding status of the Quran and the Sunnah, he still tolerated certain elements of ra'i and moulded them into arguments that could be used in the law, but only insofar as they derived their premises from revelation. And here again, footnotes are important. Wa'il Halaq states, quote, in his article, Was Shafi'i the Master Architect of Islamic Jurisprudence, published in 1993 in the International Journal of Middle Eastern Studies. Shafi'i here obviously represents himself to place in the middle of a position Shafi'i here obviously represents himself to place in the middle position between the revelation and reason expressed by Qiyas. Indeed, Shafi'i tries to argue against his predecessors who paid little attention to the Sunnah. Therefore, he forms Qiyas and assigns it as a role subsidiary to that of the revealed sources, although it remains an essential part of his methodology. Shafi'i, therefore, can be deemed as the one who synthesized the early Ra'i liberalism and the later Zahirite conservatism. And that was what Halak wrote on page 597. Also, another footnote on Malik ibn Anas. Malik ibn Anas was quoted by al-Shāṭibī, and he designates that istihsan is deemed as 9/10 of human knowledge. Istihsan is 9/10 of human knowledge. Malik's characteristic statement grasps the true essence of istihsan as a method of finding better and more equitable alternatives to existing problems both within and beyond the confines of ratio legis qiyas. Stay tuned for many more parts.